They so darn much to go over.
All right, folks, if you could, let's start finding our seats, please. Folks, if we could, let's quiet down, please. For the folks standing in the back, I certainly don't mind you standing back there. Let's try to keep the talking to a minimum while we deliberate. As Mr. White climbs over the chairs. You gotta be careful back there, sir. All right, this is the deliberation portion of this hearing. At this time, we're going to consider the evidence that was presented. We can only consider evidence that was presented, either on the witness stand or actual exhibits that were offered. We have a lot of other information up here as evidence or as an exhibit in this hearing. At this time, again, I would like to defer my comments for a moment to see what my fellow board members think, or if they have questions of our counsel that is present. I think this would be an appropriate time to ask those questions.
Mr. Chair, I would like to suggest that the county attorney review for this board this very complex difference between a residence and a domicile, because that appears to be the issue at hand.
There is a distinct difference between domicile and residence as a legal term. Residence is the roof you're under at that present time. Domicile is your home, what you consider as a home. The way I always like to remember it was back when I was a youngster many years ago. I grew up over in Yancey County, and Mr. Lee takes issues with us up from the higher ground sometimes. But I went off to the good liberal blue city of Chapel Hill to get an education. And I stayed down there for 7 years. And I got a lot of mail down there and did a lot of things in Chapel Hill. Lived in various different apartments, dorms, and things down there, and had many different roofs over my head. Now that's where I resided. You could ask me where home was, and I told you, would tell you that home was always Yancey County. So even though I may have lived somewhere, I never had the intent of abandoning Yancey County as my home. I never moved to Chapel Hill with the intent for that to be my home. And that is essentially what you look at in this type of proceeding that you've got before you. Where someone lives is their residence, but for domicile purposes, that has to be coupled with an intent to leave where you lived before. Because where you lived before, the domicile of origin remains that domicile until you abandon it and go somewhere else. So you've got to have the abandonment, and you've got to have the intent to stay where you move to. Thus, the burden of proof that's set forth in the statutes, after what I've said, the burden of proof is upon the candidate. If the challenge is based upon a question of residency or domicile, because for purposes of the statute, those terms are used interchangeably. The candidate must show all of the following: an actual abandonment of the first domicile. So if so the first domicile stays unless it is abandoned, coupled with an intent not to return. 2, the acquisition of a new domicile by actual residence in another place with the intent of making the new domicile a permanent domicile. So let's go back to my old example. Let's say I was in school in Chapel Hill for some good time, and I liked it down there awful well. So I started doing things that would support some proof that I might want to stay down there. So that could be used to show that I abandoned my former residence at Cnty. I acquired a new place down there, but I also had the intent of staying down there. Okay? Now, there's no one factor that's indicative of how you decide that question. Residence is by the totality of the circumstances. And folks, not only this panel, but district court judges, superior court judges, Court of Appeals, and even the Supreme Court often use the totality of That's when you look at everything and you pick out all the various factors and you piece them together to say, this is where this person's domicile is. Now these folks here have done an excellent job of giving you several different scenarios to support. Your job is to sift through all of these different facts and try to pick out the credible facts to support where John Ledford's domicile was from November the 3rd, 2013 through November the 4th of 2014 using this test. So now Mr. Lee did make one, I'm not limited to one, he made a valid argument that when this statute was adopted in 2007, a lot of times it was designed for people moving into an area to try to establish in that area. Therein, we could apply this test to say someone coming to Madison County, did they move from somewhere else? Did they abandon that residence? Did they come into Madison County, establish a new residence? Did they intend to establish that residence permanently? Now you've got several scenarios that you can apply this test to. In this case, you've heard evidence that Mr. Ledford has always been in Madison County. You've heard evidence that, so you can take that as a test. You've heard evidence that Mr. Ledford may have been in Madison County. He may have moved to Buncombe County. If you find that he did that, then did you find that he abandoned the Buncombe County residence and came back? I'm not telling you those things that I believe in you. I'm just giving you that as a way of example that you could look at this evidence and apply this test to.
Thank you, sir. Any further questions? Mr. Smathers, you look like you're on the cusp of a question. I don't want to cut you short.
I guess the first thing I would say is this has been an educational experience ever since this challenge has been filed. I did not know what to expect today, but I've got to compliment the citizens of Madison County. I know there are John Ledford supporters here today, and you have behaved admirably. There are probably people here, Mr. Ledford, that don't support you, but they too have behaved admirably. Mr. Hyatt made a statement that this is a small community, and after this decision is made, we're going to have to go back to being neighbors, political rivals, friends. Some people are going to like the decision made here today, and some won't. But I guess that's the reason we live in the greatest country in the world, is to have the ability to sit here and harangue all day long with different opinions. It's a very tough situation to be in, and we can't use anything outside of what's been said here today. We're finding facts, and my mouth usually gets me in trouble, talk too much sometimes, but there are some facts here that would lead one to believe that if you're looking at this three-pronged test, the actual abandonment of the first domicile, coupled with the intention never to return to it. You've got to go back to the fact that John said, I never intended to leave Madison County, ever. He's been other places, lived under other roofs. His current circumstance with his wife is unfortunate, but that's a very personal thing. And the acquisition of a new domicile by actual residents, and then with the intent of making the new residence permanent home forever and a day. So it appeared to me that we had a lot of facts presented today that would tell us that John Ledford intends to live here. So I'm not prepared to make any motion. I've got to sift back through these 3 pages of notebooks I have made up here. But the 3-point test, and we've had this from Don Wright, we've had it from this council, we've had it from that one, and in certain circumstances from this table over here too. It's a difficult thing. I was a high school principal, and we had some pretty good ball teams occasionally where I was a principal. And a lot of times that attracted interest from some pretty good ball players that wanted to be on the winning side, didn't matter where they lived. So occasionally we had people who brought their kids to our school claiming to have moved into the community. That may or may not be the truth, but it occasionally happened. So I've dealt with that on that level before. This is wholly different. But I want to shut up and let my colleagues have a go at this. They dared me to go first.
And I think from my standpoint, I'm not prepared to make a motion yet either. You heard a lot of information here today. I will say this, I think, for my part, I've certainly lived in different places. I've certainly worked in different places across the Southeast and across North Carolina. I have considered Madison County home since I was 4 years old. Sometimes you acquire property throughout your life. Sometimes you sell or don't have property anymore. Sometimes you live different places. This is my home since I've been 4 years of age. Even though I've been in Raleigh, not in Chapel Hill. We've not had a shout out for the Wolfpack yet today, but got to represent Herb over here. Folks, sometimes when you have statewide level jobs, when you have regional wide jobs, you move around a little bit. Sometimes as you go through life, things happen. I will say this, putting John Ledford aside for the moment, because we are just acquaintances. I've known Jack Radford my entire life. Known Ricky Ingram my entire life. I give great weight to what they have to say, and I appreciate their comments here today. I've never known Jack Radford to be dishonest with me. He's an outstanding educator, retired from our school system. Never had Nina Ledford as a teacher. I believe some of my sisters did, but I know she showed up for work every day. I lend great weight to what they had to say here today, and I'm going to consider that as I'm going through my notes. Now, as far as Mr. Ledford, I really didn't hear a significant challenge to a lot of what he had to say. I've always known John to be from this county. Not seen him really the past couple of years for the most part. He's been working in Raleigh, I've been working in Asheville. But I would certainly believe that when he states that he's from Madison County. When he says that in Raleigh, that would not surprise me for 1 second. That's all I'm going to say for the moment.
First, I'd like to thank the audience out here. Everybody thought we'd all be in a big argument here, but I knew we wouldn't. When it comes down to it, Madison County folks take their politics very serious. But now they're civil about it too. So I'd like to thank everyone for that. But I agree with Andy, Jack Radford, all these folks here, Mike, Lamont. These folks, I've knew them a long time, all my life about it. They've said good things here. John Ledford's domicile, I believe, was here in Madison County. They actually think that he never did up and leave Madison County. And I've always heard John say, Madison County is my home. So I know we've got a lot of evidence to sift through here, and it'll take us a little while. But on the 3 points, having a domicile in your home county is, I think, the most important thing to look at here. But that's about it.
Okay. And you know, folks, and Mr. Luke, it was the comment that I made. What I find very odd is that over time, no one has, filed a voter challenge to Mr. Ledford. No one has certainly filed a candidate challenge over the years. My job is to, support all the voters of this county, Republican, Democrat, or independent. When I took this job, I took a very serious oath to, do the right ethical and legal thing. Sometimes that's got me in a little bit of trouble, and sometimes it's got me in hot water with folks. But, my job as I see it, and I think my moral obligation to the folks of this is to make the right decision based on the evidence that I have in front of me. And certainly my impartiality was questioned this morning. That's never been called into question in my 41 years in this county. At this point, the facts I'm looking at is you have a gentleman, I think, and you have to take a look at what he said. He never intended to leave this county. That's what we look at. Or we can look at, did you actually leave and not come back? Taking a man at his word, I think he's always made the ability to return here. And I think he has so stated that he intended to return here, and he did return here. The question we have in front of us, which is somewhat narrow, is were you in that residence as of November 3rd, 2013? I think we have had strong evidence from witnesses on the stand, one after another. He could have gone on and called many more people if he wanted to and made the day a little bit longer, but I have seen very credible evidence from folks that I know to be credible, that I know throughout my entire life have always been very honest with me, both in the school system and out of the school system. So at this time, I am personally prepared to make a motion that John Ledford remain on the ballot as a candidate for office for sheriff of Madison County.
Mr. Chairman, I will second that motion. If does each individual have to give, or can he just make a motion?
The issue before the board is going to be whether or not the challenge to the candidacy will be sustained or whether it will not be allowed.
Gotcha.
So if you, whatever the motion you want to make is, that you can vote on that, and that will be the board.
That will be sufficient.
And then, based upon that, we can make appropriate findings of fact, and then you review findings of fact and execute the order. Are there any? So if you want to put a motion on the table, then I think you can vote.
Well, I will second the chairman's motion.
Mr. Chair, I'd ask that we just have a few more questions here about some facts that are troubling. I think the members of the public who have sat here all day, and maybe you haven't seen exactly what we've had in front of us, one of the most troubling pieces of evidence, very frankly, was the obituaries that were written for Mr. Ledford and for Mr. Banks. I had friends within my party brought those to me during the time frame and said, look, this proves it. But it was pointed out that proof is, if you didn't have anything to do with the writing of those two things, the simple statement that John Ledford and wife Lamona of Barnardsville is not enough to say that you don't live. Did somebody pass out? I've been talking too long, Mr. Leach.
I think we had a couple of extra back there.
Some books fell over. So, but, you know, that hits home right there. And the affidavit that was in question, I never got to see, so it's inadmissible anyhow at this point in time. But there's a lot of evidence to consider here, and I thank the members of the board for allowing me to expound.
And Dwight, I'll certainly follow up on that. Had we had an affidavit to look at, or had there been more explanation of the pictures that were entered as into evidence, might have considered that. There really was never any explanation of those pictures that were entered, and that's all we have to look at. We certainly don't have the affidavit to look at, and no witness was called to either oppose or support that affidavit. I personally probably would handle that a bit differently.
Well, and I don't think I can get in a lot of trouble up here, but I do want to say this. This is absolutely a nonpartisan issue. It has nothing to do with whether you're a Democrat or Republican. This is just an issue of law, a very, very tiny bit of the law, too. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Well, at this time, I have a motion on the floor. Do I need to reword that in regards to what you said?
Were you able to write that down?
That was Jamie's job, and he was supposed to be doing it. You want to read that back, Jamie?
I reported the motion after it was made, that the challenge be rejected, and the council be ready to draw an order to finance back to the board review, if that's.
I'm 100% okay with that.
That was seconded. You want to vote on it?
I would. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. I will record that as a unanimous vote. We are so adjourned.
We must have another.
I move we adjourn this hearing. Second that.
I would second that.
All in favor?
Aye. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Who are you, sir? I've seen you around, but I don't know that I know you. You're retired.
I'm a civil line.
Yes, sir. Not soon enough. She won't be back till Wednesday.
Okay, what we'll do is that if you want me to